Welcome to the premiere episode of the Music Revered podcast. I'm your host, Zach Hamilton. My guest for this episode is professional vocalist and songwriter Julia Ross. But first, some quick upcoming guest reminders. Guitarist, co-songwriter, and co-founder of the band Tonic, Jeff Russo will be joining me on the show next week on June 29th. The Verve Pipes frontman and original founder Brian Vander Ark will be on the podcast July 6th. The lead singer of the Gin Blossoms, Robin Wilson, will be joining me on the show July 13th. And lastly, Nick Diamonds, founder and frontman of the indie rock band Islands, will be on the show July 20th. Coming up next, I have a conversation with Julia Ross. Julia has been a professional vocalist and songwriter for well over a decade and got her start in the band Everlife, which she co-founded with her sisters back in 2001. She has also shared the stage and or studio with artists like Miley Cyrus, will.i.am, Lily Allen, Jordan Fisher, The Chainsmokers, The Jonas Brothers, and many more. And with that, let's move on to my talk with Julia. Well, welcome to the Music Revered podcast, Julia.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So on the show today, we're going to be discussing your early career, your work with the band Everlife, your solo career, as well as covering some of your collaborations with other artists over the years. That said, I'd love to start by asking, at what point did you first realize you had a genuine interest in music?
Oh my gosh. This question, I feel like it's so typical, but honestly, my answer is I can't remember not being interested in music. Like, I started touring and writing when I was 8 years old. And I feel like 8 is kind of the age where you really start remembering stuff. So that's as far back as I go. I mean, like when I was like 5, I remember going to Disney World, but I was singing the whole time I was there. So as far back as I can actually have memories, that's when I was interested in music and in writing and creating in that whole world. And I may have had the interest of being a veterinarian. Yeah, veterinarian. I almost said vegetarian. Veterinarian.
Vegetarian's a little easier to do. I mean, it's also difficult to keep up with it, but veterinarian would require schooling.
Anyway, it's always been music for me.
Yeah, it's always interesting to hear that. Again, I've had some people on the show where, you know, especially obviously in Film Revere podcasts, where they started acting, and it always seems like the child actors, it's like 8 is like that point.
Yeah,
it seems like every single one is like, oh, at 8 years old is when I got my first job. So it's kind of interesting how that works sometimes. Not only are you an accomplished vocalist, but you are also an incredibly talented musician. What I have to wonder here is how many instruments do you play, and which was your first that you learned?
I play guitar and I play piano.
Okay.
And I feel like piano is like my main instrument that I like to write on. I don't consider myself an awesome musical instrument player because my voice is my main drag, you know?
Yeah.
But piano is my first choice. And when I first started playing, I was in a band with my sisters, and when we really got interested in music, again, when I was 7 or 8 years old, my parents got a drum kit, a guitar and an amp, 3 microphones, and a keyboard, and I ran straight to the keyboard. And I was like, I'm going to rock out on this and be the lead singer. And that's just what I stuck with.
Can we talk about how awesome your parents were buying that much equipment for their kids?
Seriously?
I mean, oh my gosh.
It is like, I freaking love my parents. They have been supportive since day one, and they're both kind of entrepreneurs and self-employed, and they have been since we were kids. So like, they've always been very creative in ways to make money and always kept our family afloat. And it was kind of beautiful to watch that they were always like, okay, what do you love to do, and what's going to make you the happiest? And I was like, I want to write songs. I want to sing songs. And they're like, okay, that's awesome. Like, let's figure out a business plan. Do you want to let's all do it together? Not that they sang with us. We weren't
well, yeah, but the journey.
Kind of family. But yeah. And so that's been my whole life of,
What a terrific combination, too, because having parents that both encouraged you, but also had the business savvy to actually help you if that's something you really decided down the road, hey, this is what I really want to do. They actually knew how to make that happen for you to a degree, or at least get you started. I think that's awesome.
Yeah, for sure. And they were always like, we never had like a stage mom or a stage dad.
Yeah.
They toured with us because I was really young, and obviously we had to have our parents around. But monthly, I feel like my mom would sit me down and be like, all right, let's think about the future. Because I always had a dream of being a cheerleader from watching the Disney Channel and wanting to be like a normal kid going to high school. And
as most girls, yeah.
Yeah, I never had that. And not that I didn't have friends, but it just wasn't normal. Like my life, I was just touring all the time and really couldn't keep that perfect life that I saw on the television. And she saw that in me, and she would constantly ask me, she's like, it's okay if you don't want to do this anymore. Like, you have an option to walk away and walk towards this life or keep going in this direction. And she would constantly check in with me and with my sisters, Amber and Sarah, and just say, like, what do you want? Is this still making you happy? And we would always say, like, yeah, we want that, but there's something so special about where we're headed that we want to stay in this direction. And she'd be like, okay, let's go.
Well, I think that's such an important conversation to have as a parent with a child that is especially as active as you guys were in the industry at such a young age, is to ensure that, hey, look, I know that we're doing great here, but again, at any point, if this is not what you want to do, like, you're not forced to do this. I think that's a really big deal because kids are kind of impressionable. And I think it's very easy for you to feel forced into something and not really feel comfortable saying, hey, I don't want to do this anymore, especially when you're touring and stuff like that. It's like there's responsibilities. But I think that's great that they were still able to have those conversations with you. Yeah,
for sure. I feel like that's how every parent of a creative kid should do
ideal.
Things. I'm very blessed and lucky.
Well, and as we talked about your sisters, I think that's where I think most listeners probably will recognize you, or were at least first introduced to you and your sisters, was your work with the band Everlife, a group that you co-founded with your sisters, Amber and Sarah. Now, I'd love to know, when did you and your sisters decide that you wanted to start a band? Was it back when you were 8, or?
Yeah, it was. Excuse me. My mom was a motivational speaker, and we were so used to her, like, speaking into people's lives. And same with my dad. They did it alongside each other. And I, as the youngest and, like, the clown of the family, always, like, wanting to make people laugh and being the entertainer, I was like, I want to do something like our parents do to help people and make people smile and bring hope and joy, or even tell a story. And, again, I had been singing for fun, and it's something that I loved. I'd lock myself in my room and try to sing exactly like Celine Dion or Whitney Houston while all my other friends were playing Barbies and whatever. Like, it was like where I found my most, like, the intense space of joy. And my oldest sister, Amber, she was a huge reader, and I feel like I'm talking too much.
No, you're fine. This is an interview with you. I'm the one that's not supposed to talk too much. She's a reader, and she's just very, like, into words and books and worlds and stories and colors. And she would read to my sister and I, and, like, the main thing she would read to us was the Narnia series. Wow. It was my favorite thing, is she would have voices and everything, and Sarah and I would just be so, like, in those worlds with her. And Sarah, my middle sister, I'm the youngest of the three of us, but she was very, like, business savvy and loved people and loved reaching out to people and talking and just very organized of a person. And I was, like, I am still, like, the more, like, heady, like, colorful and let's color and think about the world, and trees have life, and let's go sing to the animals outside, that whole thing. Hey, that's a key part of the group, though. That's that true, pure creativeness going there.
Yeah, and somehow, and my mom is she writes poems, and so does my dad as well. He's more of, like, a closet poet, but his poems are absolutely beautiful. But my mom was like, okay, like, they work so well as a team. And she's like, okay, I'm going to write this poem. And there was this first thing she ever wrote was called The Cluster of Three. And it was about the three of us girls. And I was like, okay, I'm going to write a melody to this. And we just started, like, singing together just out of the blue. And it was so much fun. It started out as just pure joy and pure fun. And we would sing for our parents like, way back in the day. And they were like, oh, you guys are amazing. And of course it was terrible. Like, we sang it 3-part unison. It wasn't even harmony at that point. And so, yeah, that's when we started. And back in 96 or 97 is when we started doing it. And then we're like, oh, and somebody in our hometown told us that it was illegal to sing other people's songs. So, and it was the best, worst advice we've ever gotten, because we're like, okay, I guess we have to write our own stuff. So I've been writing songs since I was 8 years old because I thought it was illegal
Oh my
to
gosh.
sing other people's songs. Isn't that funny?
Well, and and again, this was pre-YouTube, really. So there weren't like all these musicians doing all these covers for you. You're like, well, man, there's a lot of outlaws out there because all these YouTubers are doing these songs they didn't write. Let me tell you, they're all going to jail. I can't believe they're doing this publicly. Crazy.
Are there? We're doing this right.
Well, and then I guess at what point did you guys realize that the group's fan base was getting like large? Because again, obviously, you would go on to be partnered with Disney a little bit with the group. Mm-hmm. So when did you guys realize that it was like, oh, okay, this is like a big deal, all three of you guys in the band?
97 is when we actually started like playing. We started playing in churches and like local like picnics and festivals and all that stuff. And then probably like 6 months later, we got our first call from, it was some event. I don't know what it was. We lived in Indiana, Pennsylvania, super small town. And someone called us and they were like, hey, we want you to play at this event. We'll pay you X amount of dollars. And we were like, wait, you can get paid? I promise we weren't like podunk, completely isolated people. We lived on like 26 acres. My dad built our house that we lived in. And it was just like this beautiful world in this small town. Mm-hmm. And it was great. But we weren't like, in the city. Yeah. That wasn't like the life that we led. But when they called us and they were like, we'll pay you, and we're like, oh my gosh, like we can make money doing the thing that we love the most. So that was the year that our parents were like, okay, we're going to buy you instruments. And we were obsessed with Hanson at that time.
I think most people probably were. I mean, they were definitely big at the time.
They were huge. It was like literally right when Umbop came out.
Oh my gosh.
And my oldest sister was so shy, and she never wanted to she had social anxiety and didn't want to be in front of people. And she's like, if you can find a group of siblings that's doing the same exact thing that we want to do, then I'll do it. I promise you I'll do it. And Sarah, my middle sister, and I were like, all right, then we'll figure it out. And like, in our story, it was the same day, but I'm sure it was like within a couple weeks. But Hanson was on an early morning show, and we found it, and we called our oldest sister Amber down, and we're like, dude, this is on television and they're siblings and they're doing what we want to do. And she's like, dang it.
Oh, and also they're really good. So
yes, exactly. So talented. Cool story. Actually, we started because of Hanson and obviously kept going. And then I think it was on their 20th anniversary or 10, 15 or 20th anniversary. It was after we were already signed to Disney. And we had like a spread in the American Airlines magazine on the flights at the time. And a friend of ours knew Hanson, and we finally got to have like our perfect moment. We were going backstage to meet them, and they came up to us and they were like, hey, we actually saw your picture on the American Airlines magazine. And we were like, oh my gosh, it's just like us. And we were like,
gosh,
flipping out inside. And it was like, that was the moment that I was like, we made it. We officially made it in the world. Anyway, it was.
Well, it's definitely a full circle.
Yeah. But when people started calling us and actually offering payment, and then we kept touring, and then I think in 2000, somebody contacted us that knew somebody else at Disney. And we had been touring like tri-state area and just kind of venturing out into other states as well, in our little 4Runner and our trailer and that whole vibe. And eventually hired a band and a manager back in Indiana, PA. And just new people. And then somebody was like, you need to move to Nashville. And then we moved to Nashville just on a whim. The whole entire family moved.
Wow.
And it's insane, including my brother-in-law now, Jeremy Heslip. Amber and him are married, but he moved with us as her boyfriend. And then they got married, which is epic. But like the whole family uprooted, and in that same year that we moved here, a year later, we got signed to Hollywood Records.
Which definitely propelled you significantly forward. I mean, Everlife is a big band, so it's kind of crazy how you guys started so young and then just kept the journey going. And then, again, we talk about full circle, and then now I would say you're very recognizable. I would say on par. Well, I don't know how to say this without sounding bad, because again, I think Hanson, and I said this earlier, So let the record show. I did say they were talented and that they're great, but I do feel like there was like a stigma around Hanson where it's like, ugh, God, like after the initial rush of like everyone, the wave of everyone loving them, there was like this stigma like, oh God, you still listen to Hanson? But again,
yeah,
I think you guys avoided that. Like I think people are just like, Everlife's just awesome. Okay, like
yeah.
you know.
We tried not to like do the whole like major connection to Hanson, although that's such a huge part of our story of like us actually moving forward with it because of Amber. Like she was just scared to death and then had to do it after saying she promised us if we said, she was like, there's no way you're going to find anyone that is doing the same thing. So she had to do it. But that's like, just a fun little nugget of our story.
Well, I mean, technically, you could have gone old school, though I don't know how well aware you were of it at the time with some Jackson 5 and be like, they were like massive, just saying, putting that out there, although that wasn't exactly a great childhood into music, but I'm just saying, they were successful. So,
this is true.
And speaking of that, was it ever difficult working with family over the years? I mean, again, you guys were touring for so long.
I mean, yes. Yes is the 100%, 110% honest answer.
Yeah.
I mean, your sisters, like anybody who has siblings, you know what buttons to push. And like when it's super late and you're all tired, like if you're going to punch anyone, it's going to be one of your siblings because you know that they're going to stick around, you know, your blood, they ain't going anywhere. And like, not that I ever punched my sister. I've wanted to, but
I feel like the fact that you're defending that now makes me kind of question it in general, but
we were never physical. We just knew what to say.
Yeah.
We knew what to say. But I mean, we made it work for like 13 or 14 years of touring together. And it was amazing. Honestly, like sometimes I still do. We disbanded like 5 years ago. And I still to this day will like go on an Everlife like YouTube like search and just watch all of our videos or listen to our old record. We had our last record that we made was called At the End of Everything, and it was without a label, without management, without anyone. And we hired the producers. They were amazing. They were called Zod Lounge at the time. And it's my favorite record that we have ever done because it was 100% us and our story and nobody telling us what to do. And it was a beautiful, beautiful ending to over a decade of touring and creating together.
Oh, yeah, which is an achievement in and of itself, the fact that you guys never really got on each other's nerves to the point where you're like, that's it, I'm done. I mean, again, 13 years is a long time, so.
Exactly, and that wasn't the reason why we stopped doing stuff. Like, we are still so incredibly close, and I think eventually we're going to release a Christmas album. They don't know that yet, but I feel like it's still like kind of in the back of our minds, and I think it would be awesome.
Nice. Yeah, well, it's out there now. You just keep saying it's going to happen. Like, well, now there's pressure because you keep saying this in every interview you're in, and now we have to do this. Great. I mean, I would listen to it. I think it'd be great. So it's
going to be awesome. I'm just going to say it's going to be. I'm going to speak it into it.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, positive vibes. Keep talking about it. It's going to happen. So, and then speaking of, obviously, the band coming to an end, in 2017, you launched a solo album titled True Stories Volume 1. Now, was that your first ever album you released solo?
Yes, actually. First full length. Well, I'm not really. To me, I feel like in 2017, 2018, 4 to 5 songs is full length. Because
it is. You know, it does seem to be the norm now. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, that was my first body of work. I released a couple singles before then, but yeah, that was my first, and it was awesome. I love that album.
Well, and I love it because it's such a unique sound to it. You know, it's not exactly, because I think, again, like we talked about here earlier on the show with Everlife, it's not that sound. You know, this is very much you. You're very unique in this album. Was there a particular message that you were hoping to convey with the 5 songs in the album?
Yeah, what's actually kind of interesting about that, the main producer on that record, his name's Adam Watts, and he actually worked with Everlife on our first couple songs with Disney. And I was about to sign with a different production company here in Nashville, and I just got a random text from Adam Watts, and him and Andy Dodd was like, they were one of our favorite producers that we worked with on one of our Disney albums. And out of nowhere, he was like, hey, come to LA. I'm doing a new thing and I want to work with you and write some songs. And I was like, oh my gosh, no way. Like,
wow.
Him as a creative, he's just incredible writer and super fun person, and like always cared about the heart and the art of writing. And I was like, all right. So I kind of said no to the deal that I was literally within days about to sign with a production company here in Nashville. And I went out there, and the process was beautiful. And we wrote for probably like a year, wrote for a year and tried to figure out my sound and what I wanted to be and what I wanted to talk about. And within that time, I had gotten married, and also within that 2.5-year process, I was going through a divorce.
Oh, wow.
And it was horrible, one of the worst times of my life. And he was like, okay, people, you know, like as human beings, when we see something and feel something that's real, that's what we're going to, you know, latch onto and hear the most from and learn the most from. And it's like subconsciously, we know what's real, even if it's just in the background. Like you hear a song and you feel something from it, and that's when you turn it up. And that's what I want with my entire career. I want my song to be in the background and have someone like subconsciously turn it up because they feel something.
Wow.
And that record was written from that's why it's called True Stories Volume 1, is it's just me pouring my entire heart out about the process of my relationship and love and loss and truth.
Yeah, and I mean, it definitely resonates. One of the standout tracks I actually wanted to talk about on True Stories Volume 1 was titled It Only Hurts When I'm Awake. And again, you know, hearing more about the story that kind of influenced that, I mean, that song is so emotional, and you can really sense the hurt throughout that song in your voice. And it's hard, and it's one of those songs where it's like, if you heard that, you don't stop listening. Like, you don't switch the track, like you're in it.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously we talked about, you know, your marriage and how that unfolded. I mean, how hard was that for you to write about that too? I mean, I get that it comes from a real place, but that still has to be difficult as an artist to kind of go to that place again, especially with it being so recent.
Yeah, it was definitely hard. I mean, I was coming from Disney and and writing about like, you know, relationships and finding joy in life and find yourself in you and all of that stuff, which I love to write, but I never really got to dig to the point where you can see bone, if that makes sense.
It definitely does.
And like that, it was hard. Like there were moments that I was in the studio. There's a song I have True Stories Volume 2 out as well. And there's a song on there called Erase Me. And the whole thing is basically like a desperation of like chase me or erase me, get rid of me or beg for me, that whole thing. And in the bridge, it sounds like it's produced, like the way the vocal sounds, but I'm actually lying on the floor crying, and I cut the vocal like on my back and with my hands over my eyes and just kind of screaming the line. And I feel like that moment in the bridge of that song was the making of those like 8 to 12 songs. And that process was just real. And there were so many moments where I would just go in the studio like, I don't want to say this. I don't want to release this. Or we would write something like It Only Hurts When I'm Awake. That was one of the songs that I never wanted to put out because I'm like, if I'm going to be this raw, and it was true. Like that was a line that we came up with that I think I said in passing. Like, it's like, what are you going through? And I'm like, I just want to sleep. Like, I just want to sleep. But when I'm sleeping, I have dreams. And then when I'm awake, everything hurts. So there's no safe place. And like, yeah, it was intense. And that process was beautiful and horrifying at the same time. And I'm just so thankful that I actually kind of pressed the button with my team to release it, because like coming out of it now, like obviously, I mean, it's a painful past, but I'm in a different place now that's better. But I still get messages from people saying, hey, I listened to your song and I feel everything that you said. And I have the opportunity as an artist and a lover of human souls and people and I get to say, I'm so sorry. And it's okay to listen to that song and cry, because that's what it's there for. Like, it's there for you to relate to.
Yeah, and I mean, and it would go on to be one of your top 5 songs on Spotify right now. And I think the reason why is exactly what you're touching on, is it's so relatable. Anyone who goes through that kind of an experience, they can really tap into that song. And, you know, it is kind of one of those songs where you do get emotional, and I could see how people could get swept up into it and get, you know, sad and potentially cry. But I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think it's kind of cathartic to experience some of those emotions, and in a way almost kind of closure. And I think that's the beauty of music in general, is it can have that effect on people. Yeah.
My sister, Sarah, she's a personal trainer, which is also like in my words, I told her the other day, I was like, it's so cool that you're doing what you do, because it's a different form of what we always wanted to do.
True.
She's helping people, and she's bringing joy to their life and change. And I brought that up to her, and she said, by the way, one of my clients listened to, she's like a 16-year-old girl, and she listened to It Only Hurts When I'm Awake. And she said, she's like, I've never been in love, and I've never had my heart broken. But when I listened to that song, I felt like I had before. And she's like, it was amazing, because it took me to a story, and it took me to a place without me even having to try. It was like she was watching a movie, and I was like, whoa, like, that's so cool. And it's like a different side of it too.
Yeah.
And then other people have said, like, they've had like family members or loved ones pass away, and that's another relation to that too.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, it's been really cool, like, to, you know, put yourself out on a ledge and just go like, oh, here's my heart. I hope this does something to the world. And then getting back all these different responses. I'm like, oh, this was right. And now I want to do it more. It's like, I'm addicted to being real.
Definitely. Well, and that's the greatest thing to be as an artist, I think, personally, because it makes you so much more relatable to the listeners.
For sure.
So before we get into your collaborations with other artists over the years, I'd love to kind of do a rapid fire round. Now, if you want to explain, that's totally fine. But I just have a little bit of random questions assembled here. Who are the 3 artists or bands that have influenced you most within your own music today?
Okay, first of all, I love harmonies.
Okay.
My favorite thing ever. And in my songs, they're kind of like in and out. I just feel like they're the most beautiful color in songs. And Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young are my favorite to listen to. And I've like picked apart their parts so many times, and even involved them in the Everlife songs. And I want to do that with my own music as well. So that's one. Amy Winehouse, freaking loved her voice. And the way that she just kind of took melodies and made them her own. Mm-hmm. And I always thought that was so beautiful. And lyrically, Coldplay.
Okay.
What's his name? Chris Martin? I got to meet him, I think, a year and a half ago, and I literally held my breath, because I look up to him so much lyrically, because he doesn't do the norm. Mm-hmm. Either, like, you know, and like, I read an interview one time that he was like he made people be mean to him so he could tap into the emotion of pain and fear and hurt. And that's when he wrote like a certain song or whatever. And it's like method songwriting.
Yeah. I was literally thinking that myself. Like, I'm like, wow, that's about as close to method acting as you can get as a musician or a songwriter.
Exactly.
Ultimate favorite song of all time?
That's not possible, Zach.
I thought it would be a hard question. I didn't know if it would be an impossible question.
God. Okay.
Okay. So, favorite song of all time today. Tomorrow it can be a different song.
Oh, the whole John Mayer record. Love on the Weekend. I like Love on the Weekend. Hold on. Excuse me. Sorry. I've been dealing with a cough for like the past 4 weeks, so I'm trying to hold it back.
You sound fine.
Thanks. Okay. So one of my favorite songs of all time is called, oh crap, I'm going to forget the name of it. It's by Pink Floyd. And my dad and I have daddy-daughter dates, and we listen to the Pink Floyd Metal album. And it's one of my favorite albums. Pink Floyd's Fearless. That song takes me to another level. And it's not even like a crazy lyrical song, but those acoustics, and there's a part where an entire soccer stadium sings at the end of it. And it's like listening to that is what I want someday. Every time I listen to it, I'm like, okay, I want somebody, like my ultimate dream is to be in a stadium at a piano and singing my favorite, most intense song off my album, not the single, not the not the most popular song, but the one that means the most to people, and that many voices singing along with me. And every time I listen to that song, that's what I feel is happening.
It's powerful. It's really powerful. I actually just stumbled on a YouTube video the other day, as most people tend to do. You go down the hole. And I stumbled upon this video. It was 1,000 musicians playing Seven Nation Army by the White Stripes.
Whoa.
And it was insane. I mean, you had like multiple people playing the same drum kits. You had all these drummers, all these guitarists, all these vocalists, bass guitarists, like everything. There were at least like hundreds of each different, piece of the band, and it was pretty crazy to just hear. And the fact that it was so in unison, you would think with that many people there's going to be a mistake, but you really couldn't hear it. It was wild. I'll have to leave that in the link
cool.
down.
I'm gonna look that up.
My last question for you, as far as this little round here, would be, of all the songs you've written over the years, which do you hold most dear and why? There
is a song called Three Little Girls, and it's on my sister's and I's last album, At the End of Everything. And I started writing it like probably 6 or 7 years before we even decided to make this record, before, like when we were basically with Disney at the time. And I mean, like we talked about before, of like going through issues and all of that stuff. Our parents got divorced in the middle of one of our tours, and we were just so broken and sad.
Yeah.
Because our life was changing back at home when we were gone. And I started writing this song, and the first verse is basically about like they're trying to find their place in the sun where three can breathe and live as one. And I wanted to start a story about our story. And I only got to the first half of it. Like if anybody listens to it, it's just the first half. And I stopped it and I never started it again. And then when we started writing this record, I was like, okay, I'm just going to bring up this melody, this idea that I wrote. And I sat down at the little, the Rhodes and the studio and started playing it. And then something magical happened to where I started writing the first verse. It just started coming out of my mouth, and it was about my oldest sister, Amber. And then I started singing a chorus melody. And then I started singing the second verse, and it was about Sarah, my middle sister. And it's just every verse is about our personalities and what we want to give to the world and whatever. And then I just kind of sat up, and everybody in the room was crying, and I was crying. And then they were like, okay, go cut the vocal to those. And I cut the vocal, and I came back in the room, and then Amber and Sarah had written the third verse about me without me in the room. And then I went back in the vocal booth and had to cut it while I was reading it. And so that song is my favorite because it's about an entire journey and about my two favorite people.
And so much emotion along that journey of writing that song, I'm sure, just with the content alone. Wow.
Exactly.
That is powerful. Holy cow. Hard to segue now.
Sorry.
Well, swept up in this. Another facet of your career I'd love to dive into is your collaborations with other artists over the years. Now, you've worked with will.i.am, the Chainsmokers, Lily Allen, and Miley Cyrus, just to name a few. In fact, Miley Cyrus was quoted once saying, after doing over 100 shows with Julia, I never get over what a talented vocalist she is. I would love to know, how did you meet Miley, and what's it been like working with her over the years? Because you guys have known each other for a while now.
Yeah, it's been I think over 10 years at this point.
Wow.
Yeah, we met. I knew her sister, Brandy Cyrus.
Okay.
We were signed to Hollywood Records, and we had some mutual friends, and my sister Sarah was hanging out with Brandy, and then I hung out with Brandy, and she just kind of became a part of our family and one of our extra sisters in our family. And and then one week she was like, hey, by the way, she's like, and I had met Miley before, but she was just Brandy's little sister.
Yeah.
but she was like, by the way, Miley is getting signed to Hollywood, and they're starting this show called Hannah Montana, and all this stuff is happening. And I was like, no way, that's so cool. And then a few months later, I texted Brandy, and I was like, your sister has an end cap in Walmart. And she was like, which is like where they, you know, they put that whole like cardboard thing. And she's like, I know, dude, it's blowing up. And then we were on tour with the Cheetah Girls. It was like a 6 or 7 month tour at the time before our record came out. And in the middle of the tour, they were like, oh, Hannah Montana's coming out. And she was opening for us. And it was like Hannah Montana, Everlife, and Cheetah Girls. And then in the middle of that run, it was Everlife, Hannah Montana, Cheetah Girls. So it was blowing up so fast.
Holy cow.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy. So we were signed to the same label, obviously friends, like family friends before then. And then they had one of their backup singers. This was years later.
Yeah.
But one of their backup singers got pregnant, and they were like, hey, we need you to come out and just sing background vocals for one show. And I was like, no, I'm a lead singer. I love you so much. But no.
Yeah.
And
no, understandable.
They're like, just do it. It'll be fun, whatever. Like I knew everybody, obviously. I knew her band and her and management, and because we had all done shows together for so long. And then something else happened to where one of our shows got canceled or something, and I had that whole week off. So I learned like 25 songs in 3 days and flew out with no rehearsal and killed it somehow. I don't know how. I was like sleeping with the songs in my head. And then I stayed for 7 years.
Wow.
After that. And I stayed because it's freaking fun. And she's like my little sister, and everybody involved in her camp, like she's kept the same band since day one. So all of us are just kind of family, and it's been an amazing thing to see her grow, but still she's the same person. She has always stayed true to herself, to her personality and her beliefs. And like, obviously, you know, media makes things look so crazy.
Oh, yeah, they have a tendency to kind of blow things out of the water in some cases, or exaggerate certain aspects of people's personalities, for sure.
Yeah, she has stayed the same. She's a beautiful free spirit, and just grew up in the public eye. And to see her grow as a creative and a musician and as a performer has been
and to evolve
so
too.
cool.
Yeah, obviously, to evolve into different sounds as well. Which is the same thing with you, again, with your solo albums. Again, it's very different from Everlife, so.
Yeah, exactly. What we artists do. Gotta.
Yeah, right. Lastly, you've performed at nearly every major arena in the U.S. and have been seen on SNL, Jimmy Fallon, The Ellen Show, BBC, and more. If you had to choose, which show is your favorite to perform on?
I really love SNL.
Yeah.
It's my favorite. I got to do it with Miley and with the Chainsmokers, Miley a few times. And everybody there, they're just actually, hold on, I'm going to change my mind. SNL is epic, but also Fallon. We got to do, I think it was last year, we did 6 consecutive days on Jimmy Fallon.
Wow.
With Miley. And so we have like our little dressing rooms, and we would walk from the hotel there every day. And I feel like I kind of got a taste of what it was like to actually be a part, you know, of a band on one of those shows.
Oh,
and
yeah.
both of those are my absolute favorite, because everybody in the background, they're so kind and so accommodating and so sweet, and they make you feel like you're a part of their family already.
Wow.
Like those two are my ultimate faves that I would love to do again, for sure. Hopefully with my own record.
Yeah, definitely. It's happening. You keep writing songs like the ones you're writing, it's definitely going to happen. And soon, I would imagine. So, and to be fair, you're kind of like just getting out there too. True Stories Volume 1 launched last year and is already doing well on Spotify. So I definitely think you're at the start of something big for yourself away from your band. To close the interview, I would love to know, speaking of the future, is there anything else you'd like to promote, or any upcoming projects or performances that the listeners can look forward to?
Yeah, I have been collaborating a lot with DJs. I know we talked about I've been working on that Sound Better site, and I have some songs out now that are with some DJs. I don't have a single coming out yet, but my latest single is called Medicine Man that is out right now. That is also one of my favorite songs ever, and you can kind of dance to it. And
oh, definitely, yeah, I love that
good
song.
vibe, and it's so much fun. But in the moment right now, I am working on some new songs and a new lyrical direction, and I will keep everybody updated on my socials. But there's a lot to come that I can't talk about yet.
Well, and I totally get that, yeah. Well, a huge thank you to Julia Ross for joining me on the show today. Again, you can hear her full catalog of music on Spotify, and as always, the link can be found in the episode's link dump. Thanks again, Julia.
Yes, thank you so much, Zach.
Well, that's the end of episode 1 of the Music Revered podcast. Please show your support for the Music Revered podcast by leaving a review on iTunes, Google Play Music, or wherever you happen to listen to the show. Be sure to follow the company's social media accounts on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Revered Network to get all updates first. Another great way to show your support is by following the Music Revered playlist on Spotify. Plus, it allows listeners like you to hear the music discussed by guests on the show. Lastly, my guest for next week will be guitarist, co-songwriter, and co-founder of the alternative rock band Tonic, Jeff Russo. Thanks again for tuning in to the premiere episode of the Music Revered podcast. Have a great weekend.